What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Turn the Jets podcast. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Co-host of the All 32 pod, but joined by my co-host, Mike Giardi. Usually he does our intros for that, so that was why I was smiling. I'm normally used to him roping me in. This time I'm roping Mike in. Obviously, we're approaching the tag and franchise tag deadline and kind of some of those last-second moves here in about an hour as we're recording. And a week out from free agency, so figured have you hop on. We'll talk a little bit, last couple of reminders of the Combine, and we talked a bunch on All 32, so if you missed any Combine talk and you want a bunch of that, me and Mike did 2 episodes there. I did a couple episodes, actually like 4 episodes on the Combine from Indy, on the Badlands feed. So again, plenty of stuff to check out there. We're going to talk some free agency and Combine. Mike, how you doing? This has been, I feel like I've seen you every day for the last 10 days.
I know, honestly, it was good, man. It was good to be in Indy. Good to keep the All 32 rolling. And it's funny, and we talk about this a lot now. The gaps and the periods of time where there's really nothing going on in the NFL have really shrunk. And so it's from one thing to the next. And obviously, free agency is a massive part of what's going to happen here in the next week, 10 days or so.
Yeah, it'd be interesting this offseason. We've seen a lot the last couple of years of teams kind of taking some models from other sports. The NFL kind of, as you mentioned, fills up the calendar, and but it's always kind of been a little bit stuck in the past with, hey, do you package a draft pick to dump a salary, or do you do, adding in void years and a bunch of these different things, and how you kind of 1 to 5 year plan, etc. I want to just wrap up the Combine talk from the aspect of everyone kind of dropped their post-Combine mocks this morning and yesterday, and a couple of guys have skyrocketed from having great testing. Armand Membu, Nick Emanwari is a great friend of the show. Connor Rogers had him going 13th to the Dolphins, and he was a guy who you felt like 6 weeks ago some people had him as a third rounder, and I'm nothing against Connor. I mean, Connor's reading the room with everybody else of holy shit. And then you look at guys like Armand Membu, who I kind of felt like 11 was the ceiling going into Mobile, and now it feels like 4 is the ceiling.
Yeah.
Leaving the Combine. Mike, what do you make of, is this just par for the course of post-Combine?
Yeah, I think you and I were texting before we did the show, and it's like one of these things that I think the media is always, especially with the draft prospects, 3, 4, 5 weeks behind. Like the league is already like, oh, Armand Membu, and he's going to test like a freak. And you look at his tape, and I had one guy tell me it was basically flawless tape this year, which, I don't know. I didn't watch all 13 games, so I can't tell you specifically if it was or not. But what I did see is he moves really well, but it's like they're ahead of the curve. And then he comes and does sort of the what they expected, or maybe even better than they expected in some of the testing numbers. And then all of a sudden it's like the rest of us are like, oh, to your point, 11? No. Like he could be tackle 1. In fact, he probably is trending to be tackle 1 right now. So that certainly stands out. Emanwari, I'll just say this about him. I think his tape is not as good as his testing, but his tape's a lot better this year than it was last year. So, we know the league loves these kind of athletic freaks, and it's like a 1 of 1 practically here with some of the stuff that he did. And 10 for a relative athletic score, all those things and now it's like you start to project and say, well, dude, with that athleticism, just slide him into a certain spot here and let him go, and he should be able to do things that few guys at that position can do. So it is funny though how it sort of we're coming to it. They already knew, or they already had a pretty damn good idea.
Yeah, the league is, and we're not really talking about Connor. We're talking about more of the yous and me's of the world that we like to parachute in as soon as our teams that we cover season ends, which is unfortunately happening week 8 this year. So we had plenty of time to spend on the draft. But I want to ask you about pick 7 or just kind of the Jets draft in total, obviously covering New England, and obviously me and you doing the All 32 pod now. You're very familiar with kind of the Jets building, and I remember you covering the 22 draft. I think you came on that before. You're like, Jermaine Johnson's going to be a Jet, and he ended up being a Jet. So good job, NFL Network. I'll cut this part out. But, in terms of and just in terms of where this Jets draft's at, they have a bunch of strengths, but also a bunch of holes. If you put I almost had my Joe Douglas hat, your Darren Muji hat on, your Rick Spielman, your Aaron Glenn hat, what are you looking at pick 7 and 42 for lack of a better term?
So for me, it comes back to defense. And, last year wasn't And again, statistically, it didn't compare to what they were in the previous couple seasons, but I feel like that's still there for them. So if I'm them, like, what's our fastest path to be, respectable, to be to push for a playoff spot? And to me, it's about, let's get the defense back to where it was. And I know some people are probably, your fans, Jets fans, are like, we need some offense, we need pieces. But like, okay, set the quarterback thing aside. Like, if you throw a Jalen Walker, a Michael Williams, I don't know, pick a player. Even if you said you want to go corner there, Jahdae Barron, who tested, off the charts, like, and all of a sudden you're like, well, man, like, where's the weakness? There's not much of a weakness. Or, pass rusher, someone who's a little bit more refined, like Mike Green, or, is that too early at 7? Do you want to go back? But I think it gives them some options there to really make that defense a top 5, top 6 defense again. And like, to me, that's the path that I would choose if I was them. And then you've got your head coach coming from that background. Like, let's be aggressive. Let's dominate on defense, and we'll figure out the offensive thing as we go.
Yeah, it's almost like depends on what they want to lean into. I think free agency is going to play a huge part. I think what happens with Justin Fields is going to affect, which is crazy that we're doing what happens with Justin Fields talk. But it does matter, because I think if they have Fields and Tyrod, yeah, sure, you could still trade up for a quarterback. I don't think that precludes you from doing it. But I also think that it significantly makes it a lot easier to say, let's try to ride it out with these two guys. Can we get 17 starts of at least 500 football? Obviously you hope for more upside, but generally Tyrod's a 500 starter, and Fields went 4-2 last year. So shoot, whatever. I mean, it dates back to the day they cut Rodgers almost a month ago, where I said that's probably the best path is 9-8, 10-7. If everything goes well,
right.
Hey, we have the coach, we have the roster. Let's go trade up 3-1s for Garrett Nussmeier or whatever it may be. That's probably the most logical path. Now, obviously, I'm not opposed to trading for Cam Ward. I've talked about it. If it's the guy for you, go do it. We've seen in the past, like, no amount of draft picks is worth the quarterback. So, or is not worth the quarterback. You know what I mean? But I agree with you. I think if I was gun to my head, March 4th, the 5 most likely picks, if I take Cam Ward out of it, I would say is probably Tyler Warren, Mason Graham, Armand Membu, Shamar Stewart, Jalen Walker. That feels about right, based on need, identity, the whole thing. I want to talk about Membu quickly. You talked about him. We talked a little bit at the top there, but it feels like, does it make sense for the Jets to go offensive line again where, wow, this would be a superstar unit, but also you're like, okay, now we're on, like, eventually we're going to be able to keep all these guys. I know it's not maybe the way you draft, and John Lynch hinted at this, and I think me and you talked about it, of just, John Lynch said, like, you don't draft everyone for 12 years. You draft a lot of guys for one contract. That said, AVT's coming up on an extension next year. Tippmann's the year after that. Olu's the year after that. Simpson's going to have, so does it become too much, or is it like, hey, let's have this awesome offensive line. It came from Detroit. Where do you land on, like, another offensive lineman in the first round?
I mean, I could totally see it. I mean, like I said, I think my preference would be to go defense, but like, if it'd be sort of the same thing with the offensive line, like, okay, if you look at it from left tackle through right guard, you're feeling really good about that. Where's the, Morgan Moses, holy mackerel, Morgan Moses, free agent, right? Probably not gonna be back with the Jets. All of a sudden you plug in Membu, 21 year older when the season starts, and like, you look at that offensive line and say, we could be a badass group up front. And whoever the quarterback is, Fields, Tyrod Taylor, Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, like, whatever it is, like, we're going to protect that guy and give him an opportunity to be successful, which, look at some of the maneuvers they made with Sam back in the day, or even with Zach, like, they weren't good enough up front. Quarterback wasn't ready, but they weren't good enough up front. Like, okay, if you can tell me you can build a wall like that with that kind of strength, I could easily be convinced of that, because it matters, man. We just saw it in the Super Bowl. Like, their 4 kick KC's 5, 6, sometimes 7. They kick their ass. Like, do that. If you can do that, do that. So I mean, look, I wouldn't say, if I was you and they went that route, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, what were they doing? Like, to me, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Josh Simmons on our pod.
Yep.
The one question I guess I would have is Membu feels like a smarter pick for them. Other teams, Simmons is probably a better selection, but just based on like did play decently last year, but he
Yep.
looked the most natural at left tackle. And then do you want Simmons to play the position, not play? I don't want to get
Yeah.
the Jets have gotten in trouble in years past of doing too much of like best five, and it's like, well, the five don't play well together, so it doesn't really truly matter. I mentioned Tyler Warren there, and him and Colston Loveland. I do wonder how high like I don't know if you got the same kind of insight or information there on Loveland, but I felt like everyone loves Tyler Warren, but they love Colston Loveland just as much.
Yeah.
And Schrager's got him as a top 11 guy. I think DJ's got him as a top 10 guy now. I want to say Brugler's got him like quite high. I know Connor Rogers and Trevor higher on him. Like, is there any thought that Loveland goes just as high as Warren? Just because it feels like the athete's a little, I don't know, juiced
Me
up.
personally, I wouldn't do it. I
I like
know
Warren.
when you and I talked about this in the All 32, Warren's probably not going to test awesome,
Yeah.
but just look at the tape. Like he's a dude, and the thing that you have to like about him too is like he's a real
Oh,
tight end.
he's more Gronk and Shockey type where like
Yes.
you're getting full complement of a tight end.
Yeah, I think that's sort of, I forget who did it, if it was DJ or Dane. I think it was DJ. It was like, yeah, I put them in different buckets now. This is the Gronk type tight end. Not saying he's gonna be Gronk, but like he blocks, he does all these things. Whereas Loveland is the Kelsey tight end. He's the move. Okay, he's an adequate blocker, but like you're never gonna be like we're running behind him. Whereas Penn State ran a lot of their stuff,
Yeah.
their wide zone stuff behind Warren. So like that, what style do you want? Do you want that move tight end that's basically just a big wide receiver, a big slot guy, sort of flex position, or do you want the guy that you line up at the end of the line? You can also flex out, but like line him up at the end of the line. And then obviously, as we saw, I mean, Wildcat stuff. Like he's a really, really good athlete. He's pretty intriguing, and that's a fun little piece for any team.
Yeah, I want to talk about pick 42 quickly. Again, we don't know, and I want to shift to free agency. We don't know what's going to happen, right? Obviously, the draft unfolds, and so many crazy things happen on night one that teams trade up or trade back, and guys are available that you don't expect, X, Y, and Z. A couple of guys that I've circled in my head. I'll give you 5 names that, to me, for different reasons, make sense at pick 42, and you tell me how you feel on these. And Connor mentioned him last night on their pod. My brother's as high on Tyreek Williams as anybody. Him and Alfred Collins would be 2 guys where if you don't get your run stuffing, like we hope he progresses as a pass rusher, but we don't really give a shit if he does because
Right.
Quentin Williams is going to he'll eat double teams and Quentin Williams will be one-on-one. So those 2, are 2. Jack Besh, wide receiver out of TCU. I think they could use, we saw him down in Mobile. Benjamin Morrison, to me, at a Notre Dame, the best man corner, guys played the most man. I don't know what the medicals are going to look like. I wasn't in any of those meetings. I don't know how his hip is. But if it's right, you're telling me him, Sauce, and Michael Carter aren't the best trio in the league? Like by week 4, we're not like, wow. Like this group's pretty disgusting and they're playing a ton of man because they're blitzing Quincy Williams a ton and whatever. And then Ozzie Trapilo, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I'm going to botch.
Trapillo, I think.
Yeah, Trapillo. He's a Boston guy. You got
Yeah.
pure right tackle. Another guy, as we mentioned with Membu, if you didn't go offensive line round 1, could you bring back Morgan Moses and have Ozzie be your hopefully beats him out in camp and Moses is your swing guy? What do you make of those names? There's any other guys that come to your head of early round 2, fits in need, love the player. There's always the red flag, right? We talk about round 1, no brainer, or it's a lot of upside. Round 2 is either a little bit of a safer prospect, maybe not a position of value. And then sometimes there's a red flag, like I mentioned with Morrison, Ravel out of Eastern Carolina, another corner where it's like, is the knee okay? That's usually what happens in round 2. Mike, what do you make of some of the guys I mentioned there?
Yeah, of the names you mentioned, Morrison's the one that stands out to me because, again, the medicals will be massive here. And there was a tweet from Brugler. I forget who did it, but it was like he had a second surgery. Now, the question was, is it the second surgery on the same hip that he hurt this year and had to have another one? Or was it he's had 2 hip surgeries over the course of his career, including the one he had this fall? I didn't get the answer. And I was actually hoping to see Dane. Somehow I did not bump into Dane during my time in Indy, just to ask and for some clarification there. But we talked so much about how Aaron Glenn wanted Detroit to play defense and how important it was to add Carlton Davis to their defense last year because it finally gave him. And again, I say finally, and then everybody got hurt. So his hands
Just
ended up
19 starters.
yeah, his hands ended up getting tied about how he wanted to play, but it was clear he wants to play man. He wants to be in your face. He wants to be aggressive. And if Morrison checks out physically, the tape says he's absolutely that guy. So that would be again, you're taking a little bit of a dice roll, whether the medicals look great or not at this point, because he's had multiple surgeries, but okay, that dude can play, and that fits your style that Aaron Glenn wants to play. And that would make, much like you talk about, like I mentioned Jahdae Barron, was that too rich for him at 7? But if you went defensive line or offensive tackle there, you come back in the second round, I add a corner. Well, yeah, if I went offensive tackle and I add a corner in the second round, well, I'm still doing what I talked about building my defense back up again so that it is the unquestioned strength and can be that top 5 unit. So that to me is a definite one. And I think Ravel's tape is awesome too. Again, he's coming off the ACL, so it's a similar sort of thing, but he's that same kind of guy. He'll get in your face and he can be that. I also like, and I don't know, where he's going to fall in the ranks, but Xavier Watts, the safety, and you and I have talked about him out of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
He's just a really good football player. Not awesome testing, but he's a really good, just again, pop in the tape and you see that's a guy that can absolutely help that defense.
Yeah, I would have said Evan Wari, but I guess
that's long gone and hard to find, apparently.
No, it'll be interesting. That's always an interesting one, the top round, too, of just, as you know, what's going to happen there. Happened today. Davante Adams was officially released, creating $30 million in cap space for the Jets. They're up to about $52 million pre-June 1. Lazard, and probably Mosley, Zerline.
Can I just say something about Lazard?
Yeah,
they allowed him to seek a trade.
Someone, I think Jason Fitzgerald of Over the Cap tweeted, "When are we going to stop? Where's the line?"
That's there's the other thing too, is where they thank you after they release you or whatever. The team website, or whatever, they put the tweet. It's are the Jets gonna thank Alan Lazard for stealing money for a couple of years thanks to Aaron Rodgers and doing basically crap?
The best solid quote in his overly too long tenure with the Jets was after a game. In Lazard's first year with the team, said he's got a year and a half remaining on his contract. He had 4 years remaining. Saleh knew exactly when that out was in the deal. The Jets have approached that out.
Yes.
Again, remember, he was almost traded last year. I expect him. Ben Albright had a tweet that he might join Denver. Not sure why Sean Payton has any interest there, but sure. But yeah, the Jets cut Davante. They're not able to get anything done. I was under the impression at least the Jets would. They were trying to shop him. It's not like they weren't. I think teams were like, I'm not giving you a pick to then have to negotiate an extension because Davante could just tell me to F off.
Right.
And I think with the Rodgers thing not being solidified, I thought if I was the Chargers, I would have said I'll give up a pick because again, Davante, Ladd, Herbert, that could have been a nice little combo. Although I will say,
I'm sure there's been back channeling though, right? I'm sure that if the Chargers, Rams, whoever, Cardinals, because we know he's preferring the West Coast.
Yeah.
If that's, I'm sure there's been some conversation.
I'm sure there has been. The one thing I'll say with Davante that makes him a bit of a difficult, addition to your team, amongst any other stuff, is that Davante likes to be able to do whatever he wants in terms of outside, inside, and he wants to play a lot in the slot. And not saying it's a bad thing. He's extremely productive. If he would have played 17 for the Jets this year, would have finished 100 catches, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. Still an awesome player.
Yep.
But if you're a team like the Jets, or we just reference the Chargers, or even reference the Rams, you kind of want Puka to be able to do whatever he wants. And you kind of want Ladd McConkey in the slot. You don't really want him having to play outside all the time. The Jets would have loved to have Garrett Wilson's a better player when he's inside and Davante outside, but the Jets flipped it because that's what Rodgers and Davante preferred. My point being, it'll be an interesting fit. He does actually fit with the Giants because Neighbors plays outside, and then you theoretically could have Davante inside, but they have Wandell, and it's you just run yourself into a bit of an issue there. So it's not crapping on Davante at all. Mike, I'll ask you, your colleague Greg Bedard had a report the Patriots would be interested. Again, he's mentioned the West Coast, but the Patriots have mentioned as well they're going to have to overspend, and they have a ton of money to do it. Is there any way he ends up in New England, or does it feel like Giants or West Coast based on Rodgers?
So Greg's reporting is such that he has said that he and Josh McDaniels, who was his head coach in Vegas, are on good terms.
I'm kind of shocked by that, to be honest.
Yeah, I've reported the opposite, that he was sort of leading the charge up the back steps to Mark Davis's office. And look, I'm not casting shade on. I know who Greg's talking to, or at least I have a pretty good idea, and I know who I'm talking to. I feel comfortable in my report. I think he feels comfortable in his. I guess we'll see. To me, unless Davante is chasing every last dollar at this point, and I wouldn't knock him for it. Right. I wouldn't knock him for it. I don't see how the Patriots make any sense. They're not like, I know the pie in the sky here is like, oh, well, look at what Washington did in a year. And I suppose it can be done. Okay, you can't say it can't be done. It just got done. But like, you're not there yet. You haven't shown it just yet. I don't. Green Bay to New York, then to Foxborough. I don't. Vegas in there. Like, I feel like he really, really, really wants to go out to the West Coast, and he might be willing to take a little bit of a haircut to make that work. So I'll never say never, because, you know, if they wanted to write some stupid check, 2 years, $70 million, or 2 years, $65 million, and guarantee it, it's just money. But they haven't, even though they have all that cap space, the Patriots also haven't shown that they love to spend the money.
Yeah,
so,
I don't know that they want to spend big signing bonus cash. Yeah. I think they're good with like $1 million for 40 deals more than the big ones. Although they did try to sign Ridley and these guys last year.
But even then they put a limit on it. And then guess what? Now the price for those guys is even high. Like, you know, like, would you take the Ridley for what was essentially 2 years and $50 million? Versus now having to maybe trade for T. Higgins if they want to do that, and then give T. Higgins $30+ million a year or $30 million a year on top of it. You know, like, so then it was just money. Now you start talking about money and picks. Like, that to me seems even like you're hearing Ayuk again. And maybe, I guess, Ayuk's dollar value for the next 2 years is like, he's like 2 and 50. So
actually, so I did some research into that today, because I was like, hey, I was going to suggest but Ayuk makes sense for the Jets because they need another receiver. They need a guy who plays outside. And look, he's coming off an ACL, so I have no idea what he's going to be. He's only 25 or 26, so it's very different. But the Jets went through this with Mike Williams last year, and much different situation. But again, you know, is Diggs going to be ready week 1? Is Ayuk, like, all that stuff? Ayuk is 2 years, 26 if you trade for him. Now, you do have to eat a bunch of dead money. Not a ton, but you'd have to eat a bunch of dead money in those 2 years that are ballooned up to like $45 million. It's like $8 million each year you eat, which at the time the salary cap will be, I'm sure, 8,000 times more expensive than it was this year. But Mike, one other guy I want to ask you with the Patriots, because he keeps getting two guys, one Jamie and Sherwood, who I'm not going to talk that much about because I've talked about Sherwood likely being an extension guy for the Jets, is DJ Reed. And can they pair Gonzalez and Reed, and they want another corner? Does that fit make sense? It feels like Reed, the Giants, and the Patriots are the teams that keep getting floated as like they're going to spend big on the best corner on the market, and whatever. I'm not going to get into the DJ Reed stuff, but I would just say, like, buyer beware of a smaller corner on a third big deal. That feels like not, maybe for a year it'll work, but I don't know if long term that's the best business to be in.
Yeah, his name has definitely come up. I've heard his name talked about by people who help make the decisions over in Foxborough. So I think that's real. I think there is a little bit of caution to what you just said. It's funny too, like if you go back and look at his like 7 years of just like he's been like the same. It's pretty much been that like sort of consistent performer. So is that the guy you bet on that, hey, it's going to continue for 2 or 3 more years? Or do you turn around and say, man, 28 headed to 29, right? Like starting to get into that risky period where if you're going to structure the deal, you know, whatever, you can throw a 4-year deal at him, but really it's 2. You know, I think you're looking at like nothing more than that. They like Marcus Jones, but he plays mostly inside. I mean, he can play outside, but he's a Smurf, you know, and he's been, unfortunately, like this year, he's having a really good year and like sort of kind of announced himself as like, I had questions about him, whether he could do this at a high level at corner. And I think he started to do that. Even the Garrett Wilson game where Garrett got him a lot, like he was there. It was competitive. Like it wasn't like, oh my God, Garrett's just absolutely shaking him left and right. No, he was in the ballpark and Garrett was cooking that day and Rodgers was on him. But John Jones is, not a full-time starter anymore. I think there's some interest in bringing him back, but it's going to be at a reduced rate and it's going to be with the understanding that you're not playing 100% of the snaps anymore. So they definitely have a need there. And this is where, for me, this is the Travis Hunter thing that comes up because now, are there two quarterbacks in the top three? Does that push Hunter or Abdul Carter into your lap? If it does, where do you play Hunter? Is he a more wide receiver than corner, more corner than wide receiver? But I think DJ Reed would be a nice, solid fit, a professional. But again, what are we talking about for money? Are we talking 2 and 25? We talking 2 and 20? We talking 3 and 30? Well, what are we talking about?
I think he's looking for like 20 mil a year type of money.
Well, then you know what I say to that?
Yeah,
if that's really what
I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but I would not be surprised if the expectation, at least going in, is like, can I hit 20? Because this year with the Jets, I think his deal ended up being around 15, if I'm not mistaken, or 13 to $15 million a year range.
Yeah, I see him more as a $10 to $12 million a year
I do too.
at that age.
The Jets would have loved him back at $10 million, but
right.
I just, if you told me Reed was trying to get 4 for 80, that's really 2 for 40 or something like that, that would, and if the Giants give it to him, so be it. Mike, I want to shift the focus and finish with a couple of the Jets free agents or potential targets. Some names at receiver I think Jets fans should watch. Couple of names: Tim Patrick, Josh Palmer, Darius Slayton are 3 names that come to mind. Varying skill sets. Palmer's one that I know has been mentioned. Tim Patrick, again, a guy that kind of rebounded his career, finally got healthy last year, and actually was very productive with the Lions. So, again, injury history, he's 31. I mean, it's just going to be a 1-year, $6 million deal. None of these guys are going to be breaking the bank. Tight end wise, it feels like it's Conklin or Juwan Johnson. One of the 2 guys will be either back or signed, and then they'll draft somebody, is my guess. I would say an educated guess based on what's going on there. Defensively, a lot of safeties on the market. The Jets need 2 starters. They need a starting corner and probably a defensive tackle. We talked about some options in the draft. Would you, if you're the Jets, do you go like, I'm going to go get Carlton Davis for 1 year and Trayvon Mooring and draft a safety, or do you go more like, do you go bigger at safety and bigger at D tackle and cheap? Like, how would you kind of approach looking at this market? The Jets should have ample amount of money now. Like, that money's not going to be an issue. Outside of extensions, where are you spending Woody Johnson's money? Starting next week.
Well, so, and we've talked about this, and I'm sure you've talked about it a million times since Senior Bowl. The defensive line class is freaking loaded in this draft. So I feel like I can get as you mentioned, the Alfred Collins, Tyleik Williams. Like, I can get my run stuffer to pair alongside Quinnen Williams. I could get a pass rusher if I want to, like somewhere in that group, whether it's early or, however you flip the picks there, second round if you wanted to do it there. So to me, that's where I'm looking in the veteran market in terms of, I think you could definitely add a veteran corner. Makes a lot of sense. I think you could definitely add a veteran safety. I like the idea of spending money on established guys, especially at safety. I just feel like that's a position where I've seen a lot of things at this point. You know what they are on tape. You can plug them in your system and have a fairly good read. I don't feel like too many teams. This is just me, like recent history, like pulling up. I don't feel like too many teams, like Marcus Williams being the lone exception, who like take a swing at safety and then are like, oh my God, what did we do? Like, you sort of already know how these guys fit and what they're capable of. And so, like, I like that idea for the Jets, again, because you feel good about so many spots on that defensive group. Like, get me a veteran back there, or pluck 2 veterans back there, plop them back there, and I don't really have to worry about it too much. We can address that next year if we want to do it in the draft. But like, let's attack the areas in the draft where we know are strong, and that's, you mentioned tight end, defensive line. If you wanted to go running back, that's another one that obviously has gotten a lot of buzz in terms of how guys tested and just in general. That it's a really deep class. So like, if I'm any team this year, that's sort of the angle that I'm looking for. Like, I don't even like for the Patriots. I don't want to make this Patriot centric, but like their path to getting back towards respectability too. Like, just build up your defensive line again, man. And that the draft is there; it's got it for you. So just do it. If that means double dipping, triple dipping, do it because there are players to be found, and you want to make sure that you come away with a couple of them in this draft.
Last question here before we wrap. And again, me and Mike did a ton on the combine, so you need any combine talk on Badlands. I did 800, all 32. We've done a ton. The quarterback spot, and I referenced it in the beginning, it feels like Russ is gone from Pittsburgh. Sam's likely gone from Minnesota. Stafford's back to LA. We know Rodgers is obviously not playing here next year. Fields, it feels like there's no reason he wouldn't test the market. I don't quite understand that. And I don't know that. I don't think the Jets are interested in Justin Fields. Like, I don't, can't put it any more bluntly. They've been interested for a while. Cooper Rush, Mariota, Wentz, like it gets pretty gross really quickly. Like outside of Fields, and obviously Darnold's not coming here. I don't feel good about any other person. Like not a single, like Cooper Rush, sure. If I had a legit starter, Cooper Rush as a backup's great. Like he's not Tyrod Taylor, but like same thing. Like he's been productive. He's won games. He's not great. But if you have a good situation around him, like you're not going to get blown out and like you have a chance in games. I don't know that like. I don't know where Jake Browning, like where are you turning outside of Fields? So if you're the Jets, you might have to give Fields 2 for 30 and in 1 year, like what Minshew got last year. Minshew got 2 for 25 ish. You might have to go 2 for 30 with him. I know he's not a great player, but at least him and Brees and Garrett gives you something to respect. And if the defense is good enough, you can win games. We've seen that. Would you like? What do you make of what do they do at quarterback? If you just free agency wise, because other than that, we can't really predict anything else.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's Fields stop. And it's not an awesome option, but he did show some growth in Pittsburgh last year. I think. What's their vision for him? Obviously, the offense is going to be a little different with him at quarterback.
Quickly before if they go Fields, I almost feel like it has to be like Warren and like Ozzie in round 2 because it's like we have to give you every avenue to be successful here, and it's like you can't run out with the Steelers did last year and be like, hey, Najee's going to run into the back of the center's ass 20 times,
right?
And George Pickens is going to have a mental breakdown after 6 plays, like. That can't happen. Just sorry, you can finish, but
it's an interesting point, and one of the things that I would take for Jets if I'm looking to like, if I'm sort of questioning the Fields thing. Never mind the guys that you just listed being completely uninspiring. At least you can look at Fields and say there's still potential there for some growth. But go ask DJ Moore how he feels. Again, you were talking about crazy receivers. He fits the bill, right? But go ask DJ Moore. DJ Moore wanted Justin Fields to stay. DJ Moore loved Justin Fields. DJ Moore did not really enjoy his Caleb Williams experience this past year. So I'm not saying that's the be all end all, but I'm saying there is a highly talented receiver who felt like he had some synergy there. So if I'm Garrett Wilson and I'm wondering,
who's played with Fields, which
right.
At least helps a little.
Right, absolutely. So, like, give me that. I do wonder, too, like, is it crazy to think that you could do, instead of doing the Tyrod Taylor, Justin Fields, draft a guy late, whatever, 4th round, beyond type thing and see if someone sticks there? Is it crazy to think Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor, and, like, Drew Lock? Someone of, like, Drew Lock made no money last year. And again, just sort of like, giving yourself multiple veteran options at the position. Like, hey, if Justin comes in and just falls on his face, all right, well, crap, we just, whatever, 2 and 30, we're in trouble. But okay, I have this option and I have this option. Like, give yourself areas in which, you're not like, oh my God, we're totally screwed. We have no, we're going to have to play the 5th round quarterback, even if he's not even remotely close to being ready. Like, that's sort of where I could see that thing going. Like, I don't know, Jacoby Brissett. Like, and again, what Jacoby Brissett is. It's not great. But like more veteran options to just sort of throw at the problem. And who knows, maybe you catch fire. Maybe you have a Case Keenum-like season, Jacoby 2 years ago with Washington when he kept filling in for Sam Howell would go bananas. You're like, do you catch fire with one of those guys? I don't know. It's worth considering.
Yeah, whatever the Jets do, look, Marcus Mariota is a great mentor. They already have that in Tyrod Taylor. The redundancy to me makes no sense. If the Jets sign Carson Wentz, I will be apoplectic on this channel. Um, I can't think of a worse locker room guy in the league than Carson Wentz. And I know people will be, oh, well, the Chiefs went to the Super Bowl. Dude, it's not the same thing
Not at
remotely. The
all.
Jets are trying to fix a culture problem, not have no. I will say that emphatically no. They're getting rid of Alan Lazard and DJ Reed and Hassan Reddick and a lot of these guys that I would not say added to winning last year when things got tough. Um, Carson Wentz is not the answer. I don't want to see that floated ever again. Mike, last thing here. We've seen like a weird shift with the rest of the AFC East in terms of everyone's kind of all over the place right now. It feels like there's like a pivot in Buffalo of, hey, we get lucky last year because everyone else sucked, or what are we adding big, but the cap's a disaster, but we kind of want to be in on Myles Garrett and we're not sure. We talked about New England. Miami, I honestly have no idea.
No clue.
No clue what's going on.
Except I think you and I both feel Tyreek Hill's getting traded.
Yeah, I don't know how you run it back with the same group. I would have just cleaned house and said this sucks, but we're gonna have to eat it. If you're sitting there right now, who's the team that's like can move the most? Is it New England because of the money? Is it the Jets because like they should have been good and addition by subtraction? Who's the team that can move and shake the most in the next 2 weeks before the draft to make you feel good about them?
I mean, it should be New England, just again because they have just $127 million in cap space. Of course, as you go down the free agent list, you're like, well, who exactly are they going to spend it on?
Milton Williams, $68 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like I think we've talked about this. Like free agency just isn't what it used to be because teams now the cap keeps going up so much. And teams are doing a much better job of managing the cap. You maybe have a team or two a year that's sort of quote unquote in cap jail, which is total BS. It's sort of like, you know what? It's time to hit the reset button. We call, we're a little tight. Let's call it cap jail. And then the next year, we can sell to our fans. We're going to have $100 million in cap space. Again, who are you going to spend it on? Patriots are running into that problem now. You're seeing so many teams too. Like how many teams are in the last week, 10 days, re-signing their own guys? Like, the more you look at the market, you're like, you know what? Let's just pay this guy. We know what this guy is. And maybe it's still an overpay, but we know what he is. He works in our system to a degree, or we have a specific role for him. We do that. And now some of even those like sort of B- players aren't even getting to free agency. But so with the money and with what you would assume is a significantly better coaching situation with Vrabel, Josh McDaniels, etc., and then having Drake May enter year 2, they should. But like I wouldn't be surprised if we came out of this first stretch of free agency and you're like, what did they do? They didn't really do anything. Like, oh, they were in on Milton Williams, but they decided not to go to $25 million a year, or they were in on Chris Godwin, but they're worried about the dislocated ankle and they only went to 18 million and he got 21. Like that's kind of, I have that in the back of my head as something that could really happen. In which case, to me, it's then the Jets. Can you solidify the quarterback spot enough? Again, just need competent play. Go back to we had this conversation 2-3 years ago when the defense was that good. It was like all you need from whoever was playing quarterback, Mike White, Zach Wilson, like just don't F it up. Just be competent. Just get us to 20. You can get us to 20 and we're going to help get you to 20 because we're going to turn somebody over or we're going to keep getting the ball, plus field position. Like just don't screw it up. And then because of what they have and depending on what they add, it's possible. It's definitely possible.
I didn't want to hit on this, but I decided we're going to do 20 seconds on it. The Shedeur stuff came out yesterday. I would say it was clear about the Jets. I will say this. I don't think that the Jets are the only team that felt Shedeur did not interview well this week. And I felt like it was an unnecessary report, and I don't understand burning the bridge there, and I don't want to get too deep into it and whatever. It's okay if the Jets don't like Shedeur. I don't think they're the only team in the top 10, and I know they're the only team in the top 10. Not the only team in the top 10 that does not is I'm good. It's something they don't. I don't really understand. I didn't understand it, and I felt it was normally when someone reports it, the Jets did not like Shedeur Sanders in their interview. It felt weird, Mike, and I was unsure of what to make of it all yesterday.
Let me flip this on you. Do you think that the Sanders family knows something that the rest of us don't know, so that he went into some of these interviews with teams in the top 10 that need quarterbacks and came across in a certain way, which indicated to them that that he wasn't really taking it seriously, or he wasn't that interested. Does he know that he's going free to the Giants? You know what I mean?
That's what I thought about too. Is it like,
does he have a guarantee from somebody so where he's just like, I don't, I'll do this, but I'm not going to get to you, or I don't like, it's not happening.
It could be a little bit of the Bronny thing last year. A very different situation, but where Bronny like wasn't taking interviews with any other team but the Lakers and the whole thing. And typical NBA fashion, nobody held the Lakers over a barrel and said, "You're not drafting Bronny, right. So we're going to take him with a ridiculous pick, and you're going to give us back a first-round pick for him." Not sure why nobody did that. Call LeBron's bluff, dude. Don't play.
Right.
Like don't do it.
Right.
Of course, no one did it, and they let the Lakers walk over the NBA, similar to the Nico. Kyrie and Anthony Davis, Luka situation. But I agree with you. I think it just felt weird. I didn't love the way it all was approached. It felt like unnecessarily airing the Jets out. You could have wrote the top 10, right? The top 5, the top 10, the top 8. But you wrote 7 knowing you're clearly implicating one team that is an easy punching bag. And I just felt like,
why? But you know why? Because Because it's the Jets. It's New York. If you attach New York to anything, you attach the Jets to anything, they expect more clicks. That's the nature of the beast. So if you say like, hey, I was going to say the Tennessee Titans, but they're 1, but whatever. Like, I can't even like Carolina. Carolina didn't like Shedeur Sanders. Even that's not good because they have Bryce. Well, not that Bryce Young might be the answer, but like, you know what I mean? Like some team like that, New Orleans. Okay, who cares? It's not going to get the same, not going to generate the same sort of, and then like, because then you can frame it later on. He goes somewhere else, gets drafted, and then plays the Jets. Oh, the Jets hated you. They let it be known, and then it becomes, then it feeds itself for that period of time. So I'm not surprised. I do think, and I know you were hearing some of the same things that I was hearing. I don't think too many teams actually view him as a first-round quarterback. And I'm not going to tell you he's not going to get drafted in the first round. In fact, I still wouldn't be shocked if Cleveland picked him at 2 because they're the Browns. But like, it just feels like whoever does that is really desperate. Yeah, and that generally doesn't work for neither player nor team.
Jordan Raanan reported, and then we'll finish. We're finishing this with this, but Jordan Raanan reported the Giants would probably trade up to 1, and they'll probably likely draft Cam Ward. I still weirdly think they're going to take Shedeur. I don't know why. It feels like Joe Shane like 800 times talked about completion percentage and winning games, and not that Cam doesn't do that, but he kind of felt like he was like hinting. They almost feel like they're desperate for a high floor guy. And he made a weird comment about Cam, how he digs himself into holes and digs himself out of it. Not that that's not true. It's absolutely true. But Cam's a way better prospect. Regardless, we'll get into more of it. Mike Giardi, Boston Herald, Boston Sports Journal. Wow, that was that. Boston Sports Journal, all 32 pod, CLNS. Mike, appreciate you hopping on as always. I will make sure we do not hit on the Boston Herald. That will not be named. Appreciate everybody for listening. I'll be back with Zach Rosenblatt tomorrow. Trevor Sikkema on the feed on Saturday. Appreciate everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, guys.